Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Today's podcast is sponsored by SLI Systems, providers of intelligent site search and navigation solutions. Learn more at sli-systems.com and listen to their interviews at ecommercepodcast.com.
Your path to e-commerce success starts right here. You're listening to Practical E-commerce, the podcast for e-commerce results.
Hello, I'm Mitch Bettis. Welcome to another edition of Practical E-commerce Podcast. Today we're talking with Vince Talbert, the Vice President of Marketing for i4Commerce, about a product i4 offers called Bill Me Later. It allows a consumer to shop at a website without providing credit card information on a website. They can shop without a credit card, and if they use the Bill Me Later service, Bill Me Later pays the merchant up front, and then Bill Me Later worries about collecting from the merchant who made the purchase. It's a way to instill some security in the process. It makes customers feel a little more secure about not having to provide credit cards online, but still being able to shop. Merchants get the benefit of being able to get paid for a product and having a customer feel good about the transaction he or she made. Vince talks about some very positive statistics about sites who use Bill Me Later in terms of increased order value, more repeat business, and actually more business. And so he kind of explains the Bill Me Later function and how the process works to implement Bill Me Later at a merchant's website. We think you'll find this interesting, and we'll get on into our interview with Vince Talbert of Bill Me Later and i4Commerce.
We're talking today to Vince Talbert, the Vice President of Marketing for i4Commerce. We're wanting to learn a little more about i4Commerce and a product it offers in particular called Bill Me Later. Vince, we appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Maybe we begin by just telling folks briefly, what is this Bill Me Later function?
Yes, Bill Me Later has been found by many leading analysts, such as Gartner, Forrester, and Jupiter, as the most trusted way to pay online. And it was a payment option designed specifically to make purchases online without using a credit card, just simply checking Bill Me Later, and you'll be sent a bill in the mail later.
Maybe we divide our conversation here maybe into two ways, how it works for merchants and then how it works for consumers. If we start on the merchant side, because that's certainly the kind of the majority of our readership and listenership, how does it work? They add the Bill Me Later functionality to their current shopping cart, and then from there, when a consumer selects that function, what happens? How does what takes over? How does the consumer get paid? What's the process?
Yes. Like you said, the retailer would add Bill Me Later as a payment option that would show up on their payment page. But to get the best results with Bill Me Later, they would actually also tell the customers that they have browsing their website about the new payment option they've introduced early in the shopping process, so that they can get those browsers to turn into buyers. By letting customers know that you can buy without a credit card and get your purchase today and pay later, 30 days or even more later, it allows you to get customers who wouldn't have bought today to turn into impulse buyers, because you've addressed their concerns around security or the discomfort or hassle of entering a credit card number. Once they check the checkbox on the payment page that says Bill Me Later, they'll be served a page that you, the merchant, served to the customer that restates their billing address they already gave you, It asks for two basic pieces of information about themselves to verify who they are, such as your date of birth and your last four digits of your Social Security number. And then it provides the terms and conditions of the offer. And then they ask you to accept those terms, and within 3 seconds we kick back a response to the consumer that says they're either approved for it or it was unavailable to them at that time. If they're approved for it, you as a merchant would have the ability to then know that you're covered for that transaction. You'll get paid by Bill Me Later for that transaction. So you will go and ship those goods to the consumer. Then that night you will settle your transactions through your existing payment processor, much like you do with Visa and MasterCard, and you'll get full payment for that purchase minus the transaction fees associated with it. And you know that we take the credit risk associated with that transaction. So we pay you, and then we worry about collecting that purchase from the consumer. As long as you've shipped the goods and the customer is satisfied in that sense with the goods and services as promised, it's our responsibility to go collect. We send out a bill to the customer, typically in 5 to 7 days, and they have typically 30 days to pay that bill without incurring any additional cost. However, for their convenience, they can choose to pay for that purchase over time. They would incur some small interest charge, and they would have some minimum payment due. But at the end of the day, at that point, it would work very much like a credit card in the sense that they get a monthly bill with a minimum due, and interest would accrue if they haven't paid the balance off in full. They can choose to pay online by going to our website, entering their checking account information, or they can choose to send us a check through the mail.
One of the interesting things I find about the service is that it seems to accomplish a couple of things that we write about frequently. One is it minimizes a security risk because you're only providing credit card information really or billing information to a single source, that being Bill Me Later versus at multiple websites. And then two, we tend to write frequently about alternative payment options and how those things for a merchant boost conversion rate. Can you speak to the latter in particular? Are there statistics that show what kind of additional sales have been brought to the table for a merchant once implementing the Bill Me Later function?
Yes. Typically when a merchant launches Bill Me Later as a payment option and they use it correctly by letting their customers know in the purchase process that there's this new payment option available to them, they can see double-digit share of their sales occurring through Bill Me Later. And then what we find is those sales occurring through Bill Me Later, about half those customers will be incremental to the retailer, incremental new customers that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten. And we can report that data through a variety of third-party research studies that have been done that have validated that typically about 50% of the customers would not have purchased without Bill Me Later. And more importantly, not only are they incremental new customers, but they're also high-value customers. In fact, what we find is that when they make that purchase, because you're providing instant buying power through the instant credit process that we're providing, it gives people more buying power, and as a result, they spend more. And typically, the average order value is 50 to 75% higher than their standard purchase, your average as a merchant would be. And so you're seeing higher average order values, you're seeing incremental customers, and then on top of that, what you see is the customer returns to your website more frequently, typically 46% higher repeat usage in the first 90 days of their life with you. They'll spend 46% more often because they have the Bill Me Later payment option. Bill Me Later users have a fantastic experience. It's often referred to as the wow experience. They just are amazed at how easy it is. And so as a result, they just look for merchants who accept Bill Me Later and frequent them more often.
On the merchant side, I am assuming there's a process to integrate a Bill Me Later function into my current cart. Given that there are 400 and some odd shopping carts that are out there that various merchants use, is this a reasonably easy integration? And is there technical support available to help me if I want to implement a Bill Me Later function at my website?
We've spent a great deal of time trying to make the process as easy as possible. Overall, the key takeaway for a retailer is that we work with the leading payment processors out there. And so we've integrated ourselves into the leading payment processors, much like Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and Discover are integrated into them, so that you're able to easily add Boomulator as a payment type to your checkout along with the other payment methods you accept. Typically what we hear is that merchants spend anywhere from 100 to 150 hours of time to do that integration, and usually requires 2 or 3 people over a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. But we've had retailers do it as fast as a few days, and for very large merchants who have very complex systems and a lot of bureaucracy, it can take a couple of months. Throughout the process, we have a dedicated implementation manager who works closely with you and walk you through all the documentation that supports the implementation, and is there to answer any questions you may have.
As benevolent as I am sure i4Commerce is, I don't expect that they provide the service at no cost. Can you give us an idea of what the general cost structure would be? What would it cost a merchant to implement this?
Yeah. Typically, as is today with credit cards, the price varies by the size of the merchant and the industry the merchant is in. But what you would typically find is if a merchant's paying, they would find that Boomulator costs typically 30 to 40% less than what they're paying for Visa and MasterCard. We've really gone out of our way to make sure that there's both a incremental sales and a cost benefit to a retailer. But the pricing is not universal. It is really dependent on the size of the merchant.
Is that dependence based on cart size or quantity of transactions? What are the variables there?
It's really based on the amount of sales volume that the merchant does.
I noticed, I believe, on your site or in some material that I had received, that this also can integrate with multi-channel merchants. We have a lot of our folks who operate a brick-and-mortar store or also have a catalog that complements a web store. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit about how Boomulator could help integrate and work with other channels in addition to an online store?
We have about 40% of our retailers who utilize us online also utilize us in their call center. And it works very similar in the call center where in the catalog they mail out, they would say, now there's a new payment option that lets you buy without a credit card, feel secure, pay later. And by messaging that, the cataloger would see higher demand per book mailed. And that would show up in the form of incremental calls into the call center, making orders. And when you're in the order process in the call center, it would go something like this. How would you like to pay for that purchase? We accept Visa, MasterCard, or we can bill you later. Customer would say, I'd like to be billed later. And we would say, it's offered by Boomulator, and it is subject to credit approval. You must be 18 years of age and a U.S. resident. Would you like to proceed? Yes. Okay, to verify your identity, we will need 2 basic pieces of information, your date of birth and your last 4 digits of your social security. Please provide that. Customer would provide that. Then the customer service rep would then submit the transaction, and in less than 3 seconds would get an authorization back for that purchase. And at that point, that transaction would be authorized, and you could fulfill that order, and we would be taking the risk for that order.
Well, on the consumer side, we've spoken a little bit about how the consumer interfaces with this. Obviously, Boomulator is offered now at a multitude of sites, large and small. The consumer, once approved by Boomulator, can get a single invoice, if you will, for multiple purchases for all of their spending, as opposed to putting in credit card information at all these sites. Is that correct? Do I understand that correctly?
That's absolutely correct. That's exactly how it works. For the convenience of the consumer, they'll only get 1 bill a month from Boomulator. All the transactions they make with Boomulator are aggregated on that 1 bill, and there's no preset spending limit. So they can go make those purchases, and we will put that all on that 1 bill, and then they have the choice to pay overtime or pay it all in full with no additional cost to them.